Hello, and welcome to episode 40 of the SomerKnits podcast. Welcome to episode 40 of the SomerKnits podcast. That feels like a really big number. I don't even know what to say. It's been almost 2 years. I believe my first ever episode was in May of 2021, so I need to double check that. It could have been April. I could have hit 2 years already. I don't even know, but I'll check that at some point. But the point is, this is a knitting and fiber related podcast, occasionally crocheting, occasionally spinning. Haven't done any weaving recently, so I haven't worked that in, but mostly knitting. And I am going to talk about a number of different projects today, but also in my last episode, I ran out of time for books and the other things that I like to get into here. So I'll start with the knitting, but if you are here for the book reviews or the what I read, I don't really go into detailed reviews, but that'll be at the end. I also have some warm weather or spring knitting plans that I'd like to talk about, and just some things I've gotten into this week. So I have had a nice relaxing tea, and I've been thinking about what I wanted to say most of the day. So let's hope I don't forget anything. If you also podcast, do you think of like 10 things you should have said as soon as you finish editing your episode and like start uploading it? Because that happens to me almost every episode. And I don't know if it's just me not making good notes ahead of time, or if that happens to everybody. Like you think, oh, I'm going to say this, and then totally zone out and forget to say it, or you get distracted by 10 other things. So one of the things I wanted to ask last episode, because I showed the crocheted granny square that I'm sending to Kristen from We Share Needles. By the way, she had her baby, I think yesterday. When I'm filming this, today is Friday, April 28th. So I believe she had the baby on Thursday, April 27th. But anyway, is it just me, or is weaving in ends on crochet more difficult than weaving in ends in knitting? I don't know if that's just me, or if maybe I never learned to do it correctly, because I learned to crochet from my great-grandmother when I was very little, but I remember nothing about what we did to weave in ends. I just don't remember that part. And so it feels like I'm making it up again every time, because I don't crochet very often. And so my end weaving in feels very random. And maybe because crochet is bumpier, maybe it's a little bit easier to hide it sometimes. But when I weave in ends in knitting, I basically duplicate stitch on the back side, and I go a few different directions to really lock in those ends. But in crochet, I find it very hard to follow my stitches, because instead of the loops being stacked, the loops are sideways. So if that makes sense, or if you have advice on weaving in ends in crochet, I would love to hear it, either in the comments or message me on Instagram or whatever. I just very curious if I'm the only person who finds weaving in ends in crochet much more challenging than weaving in ends in knitting. Let's start with finished objects, because there's only one, and it is the Trinigan, which is It's marketed as a cardigan, but I see it more as a jacket, at least the way I will probably wear it. It is an oversized but crop length sleeve jacket cardigan sweater. Now, this one has not been blocked yet, so you can see that the stockinette is still trying to roll in on itself. I did steam it because I wanted to wear it immediately. I finished this, I finished weaving in the ends Tuesday night, and we have had a cold snap this week. So it's been in the 50s and 60s Fahrenheit all this week, and down in the 40s in the mornings. But I wanted to wear it because next week it is jumping back up into the 70s and 80s, and there will be probably no more opportunities to wear this cardigan unless we get another cold snap. But the farther into going into May that it gets, the less likely that Oklahoma gets any more cold weather. Now, you never know because we have had some cold Mays before, but looking at the extended forecast, it's going to get hot. So I wasn't willing to wait multiple days because this is a worsted weight garment and it is big for this to dry and miss my opportunity to wear it. So I went ahead and just steamed it, but it's almost like it needs to be re-steamed every day to keep it from rolling. I do kind of wish I'd gone down an extra needle size on my ribbing. I followed the pattern and I feel like my ribbing is a little bit loose and like it could have really stood going down an extra needle size, at least on the sleeves. I feel like it's totally fine on the body of the cardigan, on the button band, and on the bottom. I will insert some full-length pictures. I'll try and stand up, but it's like super awkward to just try and show the bottom of the sweater. Yeah, I don't know that I can get here. We'll move the chair and see what happens. So you can see that it is a long cardigan, and the bottom starts with like 3 inches of ribbing, and then you do the whole body up to the split for sleeves, and then you separate for each side of the front and the back, and then pick up for sleeves, and then at the very end you pick up all the way around to do the button band. And I think that it is a gorgeous design, and I can totally see myself wearing it all the time. I've worn it for the last 3 days straight. And I've taken pictures each day, so you can see I wore it just casually on Wednesday, running errands. I wore it to my office a little, I wouldn't necessarily say more dressed up because I wore jeans, but like with heels and things yesterday. And then today I needed to do some things at the kids' school, so I wore it with jeans and tennis shoes. Again, compliments every time I wore it. But I do think I will get less rolling and cleaner lines once I do a full wet block. I'm absolutely a big believer in a full wet block. And I feel like because of the swatch, the yarns are going to bloom a little bit once I do wet block it. So if you are a new viewer, I used Knit Picks Chroma Twist in the colorway Narwhal for the main color, which is a subtle color shifting yarn. I mean, you can see it's got a bunch of different shades of blue and aqua in it. And then for the contrast color, I used Spin Cycle Dream State, which is their worsted weight base, in the colorway Overshadow, which is a dark to light purple fade. And I purchased 5 balls or 5 skeins and asked for them to all be different. And they were, and it was great. And I had thought I would fade from dark to light at the top. And you can see that there are places where it does get lighter at the top and it is darker at the bottom. But I had so much of the Spin Cycle left over. I should have brought it down to show you. I have already put it away. But the entire lightest ball didn't even get started. And the next to lightest ball only part of it was used. So, and I had a part of another skein left because of where things were when I was doing the sleeves. So I have almost 2 full skeins left of the spin cycle, and I can weigh it and let people know if you are interested. And then I did have 2 full skeins left of the Chroma Twist. I had bought 7, or actually I got them for Christmas. I'd put 7 on my wish list because yardage wise, that's what I needed per the pattern. It did take an entire ball of the Chroma Twist to do the button band. An entire ball to do the button band because it is so long. I love how when you pick up for the button band, you leave that ridge across the top to match that 3 needle bind off on the sleeves. I absolutely love that. I think it's beautiful. 100% loved and recommend this pattern. Absolutely. Considering knitting it again for my daughter in the smallest size, but I don't know if, because this is the 3rd size, I don't know if that smallest size would still just like totally overwhelm her. I kind of want to knit this again for myself and go down a size because while I do enjoy the oversized look, I still think it would fit me well down a size, and my shoulders are narrow. So since the whole body is oversized, I think I could get away with that. Real quick, I know I showed these as a finished object last time, but I've actually woven in the ends on the second sock and blocked them. So these are my Advent socks from Area 51 Fibers. This is the Tea with the Bridgertons self-striping Advent skein. And I just did the puzzle box stripe socks, I believe is the name of the pattern. I did 1 repeat of every color except I broke into the yellow on the 2nd repeat. The skein came with 2 full repeats of the colors, I believe. So I have basically half the yarn left and more than half of the purple mini skein that came with it. So I can get a whole nother set of socks out of this yarn. And these are on my Knitting Left Sock Witch sock blockers, which I adore. I believe that they still have sock blockers, but they're not decorative ones like this anymore. But I could be totally mistaken because I haven't looked recently. But these are my socks, and I'm super excited to wear them. Let me know if you subscribe to Socks and Stocks season, because that season is almost upon us. I don't like it when it's super cold outside, but this middle of the road, it's not hot yet, but it is not freezing anymore, is good. So that was it for finished objects, and now I want to talk about works in progress. I started a new work in progress last night. I kind of went back and forth on what exactly I was going to do when I finished the Trinigan, because there are so many things I want to do. I get overwhelmed with the possibilities. So I did some swatching, and I'll get to that. But for actual works in progress, I decided to do an Anya hat, which is a pattern by Ponder and Ply. It's the only pattern of hers that I have, but I've made one before. If you've been here a long time, you might remember it had a blue chenille top and then the blue faux fur all around the outside. And maybe I can show you a picture of what it's meant to look like. It's hard to see because it's white in this picture, but you get this big furry hat. Anyway, I had a single skein of Debbie Bliss Glen in my deep stash. I couldn't even tell you what year this was bought, but it did come from Loops. So in theory, it was bought after fall of 2007, after I moved back here. It is 30% fine alpaca, 30% merino wool, and 40% acrylic. And one skein is 50 grams, which has 90 meters. The color is just a number, so it's not very helpful. And I didn't even remember when I got it out that the skein fades from dark to light. As I was knitting, this is the base of the hat. So you knit the inside of the hat first, and then you pick up and you knit the fur that goes all the way around the outside. And that actually helps this be snug on your head, and then the fur stand up more to the outside. Maybe I'll go find mine in a minute. as I was knitting the inside of the hat, I was very worried that I was going to end up playing yarn chicken. This little bit is all that's left. It didn't end up being quite as dire as I thought it would be, but I mean, I was a little, but I know I'm not finishing my sentences. The decreases on this hat are actually kind of rapid. So you get this more, I don't know, you get almost a flat top the way the decreases work. So nothing sticks up really. But anyway, it's this nice neutral brown. It is an easier care yarn. And I want to do the whole hat and then figure out if it feels too feminine or if a guy would wear it. Because if it feels masculine enough with the dark brown and this brown faux fur, then I'm going to send it to my brother because his birthday is in May. I think it will be because it resembles those old real fur hats where the fur is all along the outside and stands up, and then the hat itself like has this nice flat curve to the top. I don't think I'm explaining that well at all, but hopefully you know what I mean. But anyway, here's the fur. I think it's a really good match for the yarn. So I want to do that. I cast this on last night, and while I was mentally prepping for filming, I went ahead and finished off the inside. I was going to be too worried about the yarn chicken to focus on anything, so I just wanted to go ahead and finish the decreases and have it done. And after I'm done filming, I will pick up for the fur brim so that I can keep the momentum and just knock this out. I think these hats are really fun and different from just like your everyday ribbed beanie or hand knit hat. I think it's a really fun pattern. So I do have another one planned, and the inside of this one is going to be this, blowing out a little bit, this dark green, which does have some tweedy flecks in it. I do not have the ball band left from either one of these. I don't remember if I ever had the ball band because this might have been like estate sale yarn. This is definitely deep stash, but I'm going to go with maybe like 2009 or 2010-ish on acquisition date for this. So it'll be nice. I know there was a bunch of it to start with, and I've used it off and on for hats for mostly for guys in a number of different projects, but these I think are the last two skeins, and I can't tell if they're complete. I have not weighed them. So I just grabbed them both out, and then I have this faux fur yarn to put with these, and I know that that's a much bigger contrast than the other. So you can see this is the more brown of the two, and this is the more like wolf gray color. This one's called Husky, and this one is called Mink. And I do not like to spend my money at Hobby Lobby if I can help it. This is stash yarn that just needs to be used up. So I will use the Mink with the dark brown, because when I was holding everything up last night, like the Husky could have worked, but it's just not as good a match as the Mink. And I think the Mink will be great. And then I think the Husky is good with the little white flecks that you see in this. Based on how these feel, I actually wonder if this is a hemp blend yarn because of, or it doesn't feel like a linen blend. It really feels like a hemp and wool blend to me, but I have absolutely no memory. And maybe I'll dig back through my projects and see if I can figure out exactly what this yarn is, but let's just use it up, right? So I'll do another hat base in that and pick up with the Husky and use that and see how I feel about that outcome. It may go into gifting stash, or I may send it to somebody. I don't know. But anyway, that's another planned cast on. And I'm enjoying the hat because it's like something quick and satisfying to work on. I'll get a finished object fairly quickly out of it, but also since it doesn't require a lot of focus, my mind can wander to what do I want my next big project to be. And don't come at me and say I should finish some of the other projects on my needles, because that is definitely something I should do, but it doesn't mean I won't cast on anything new. By the way, I am keeping the hat project in my Love is Love bag by Kelly McD on Instagram. It's a medium-sized bag because I have so many small bags. I do not need another small bag. But I love the handle, and the inside has this gorgeous heart print. And I may reverse it sometimes just because I like that print a lot. But it's got nice, soft, recycled t-shirt drawstrings, easy for carrying. And I just wanted to use it. So even though I could have used a much smaller bag for my hat project, that's where it's living, and that's just fine. In a smaller bag, in a little Tom Bin bag, I have a next potential cast on. So I was trying to figure out what to do for my mom for Mother's Day, if I'm doing the hat for my brother for his birthday. And I looked at shawls, and I found one by Locatelli, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put it. It's a One Skein Wonder shawl, and it's like half circle shaped, I think. And there are drop stitches, and it's supposed to use just one skein of sock yarn, like one 400-gram skein. So I actually need to frog this. I started a different shawl. I started a free pattern shawl. I only got this far, and I was like, this is not happening by Mother's Day. And it was on size 5 needles. So we were just going to take that out. But you can kind of see how the colorway, blowing out, knits up, at least across a small span. So I've made a mess of this yarn now. This is Southern Skeins. I don't remember what month, and I don't think I put the tag in here. But the colorway name was Watermelon. And it is a 80/20 sock yarn, I believe. And so what I'm trying to decide, and yes, I'm just going to frog that right here, is if I am going to do the entire shawl. Ooh, too bright. No. If I'm going to do the entire shawl in Watermelon, which is probably showing best about right here, it is a very pale green and a okay, we're turning that off for a second. I know it's going to make me dim. Woo! Let's change colors. But maybe we'll get a better view of the yarn color. Okay. So it's a very pale green, and wish I had something for white balance. Pale green and a pale pink, with pops of that pink getting a bit darker in there that you can see. So I can either do the whole shawl with this on its own, or I can, and this skein is a hot mess, I can alternate sections where I do a garter section and then a drop stitch section in this, and then do a garter stitch and then a drop stitch section in this. And this is leftover yarn from my very first Love Note, and it is the Clark and L Candy Hearts yarn from winter of 2020. It's a pre-COVID yarn. So this has very subtle pops of the light green, a light blue, a light pink. It's definitely, I've mentioned this in the podcast before, greener than I thought. Here we go. You can kind of see all the different colors. But it ended up overall being greener than I thought it would be based on the inspiration photos. So I can alternate, and yes, I know that's a mess. Deal with it. I can alternate the two and do a whole section in this, and then a whole section in this, and then go back to this, to create a bit more interest maybe, or get a few more colors in there, or break up the overall, if it feels like this is too much, or I can just do the whole shawl in this. And I can't decide what to do. So if you have an opinion, I would absolutely love to hear it. The other thing I could do is knit up the first section and do it in just this and see how it's vibing. And if it's good, just keep going. And if I feel like it needs other colors in there so that it'll go with more, because I foresee this being like a wrap around the neck when you're dressing for the office kind of summer scarf, lightweight thing. So thoughts and opinions are totally welcome. So I did swatch for the building blocks cardi that I talked about last week. And I'm a little disappointed in how the yarn swatched up. So here is my swatch. And it's a lovely blue. It really is. However, I just don't know. I don't know that it's everything I want from each of these yarns individually when they're together. So this is more accurate color-wise. It's fairly dark in person, and it's dark because of the blue Nutiden, which is definitely a blue-gray. I have another blue Nutiden, but I think it's even darker. So I don't know that that would correct the issue. Also, I was unable to get gauge, even going down needle sizes. So I started with an 8 like the pattern calls for, and I needed 17 stitches to 4 inches, and I got like 13, maybe 14. It was not good. And so I went down to 7s knowing it's probably not going to do it. And sure enough, definitely didn't do it. So then I went down to 1 strand of Nutiden and the fuzz. And so that's why you can kind of see it gets a little bluer at the top because it's only 1 strand of the Nutiden. And that's fine. It's fine. But in person, when I look at it, it's not everything I want it to be color-wise. So I think I'm going to swatch just the Nutiden. Held double, although when I messaged Amy, I asked her for some advice on working with Nutiden because she has videos about working with unspun yarn and things. And she said this particular colorway from Nutiden was thicker than a lot of their colorways. So if I cannot get gauge with this, I may try with the dark gray to light gray fade that I have and see if I can make that work. Although that's not the overall shape of cardigan that I was hoping for from those colors. So we'll see. I really like the shape of the building blocks cardigan for this actual color of yarn, which is looking very gray on the screen, but in person has all this depth, this blue. And here, I'm going to turn the light off again. And I know, sorry, and I hope that's not bothersome, but I don't know if you can really get a good look at the individual strand colors. I just don't think my camera is going to capture how much amazingness is in there. But I still really love this color for the building blocks cardigan. And so I'm going to try again without the fuzz because I love the fuzz. I love it. I love this bright blue color. It is gorgeous. Oh, it's still stuck to the Nutiden. It's gorgeous. I love it. And I have 1,200 yards? Close. I don't know. I have a lot of it, and I can see it being something beautiful. It just, I think this is toning it down too much for what I really want out of this. And this is also bulkier than your standard mohair. This is a Surrey. And it's a whole lot fluffier, like bulkier. so it's bulking this up too much. So I'm curious about swatching this on its own for something else, or held double. I probably don't have enough for anything reasonable. But finding something closer to its actual color to hold it with so that I can get all of the brilliance of this color out of it. So I think that's what I'm going to do, because sometimes you have to be flexible, right? And you have to change your plans, and that's just life. Now, speaking of swatching, the other thing that I am planning on swatching for is the Corran cardigan by Rebecca of the Creabea. And this cardigan has short sleeve and long sleeve options and both round neck and V-neck options. I think I am going to do the V-neck, and it's going to be fairly cropped. I'm going to do size 4, and it is going to be short sleeve. And this is just, I want a little spring throw-on cardigan for over dresses and things. So I have this, I just wound it up the other day. This is Yampa Valley Fiberworks Natural Fiber Milling from Craig, Colorado. And it's hand-dyed, and they don't do dye lots, and the skeins do not match. And I'm not sure I could alternate skeins effectively in lace work, but I may try because there's definite differences. So one option is to start with the darkest and fade across, or I wondered about doing the ribbing and all the ribbing, like the bottom, the button band, the sleeve ribbing, everything in the darker and alternating skeins in the body of the two lighter ones. I don't know. I'd love your opinion. Because I only have these 3 skeins. This is it. And I think they would look beautiful as a Corran cardigan if I can get gauge. And I'm going to swatch for that, and I am going to wash the swatch, and I'm going to see how it feels. The other thing is that it's a 14 stitches and 26 rows per 4 inches. So 14 stitches is not a whole lot, and it's written, I believe, for worsted weight yarn, and this is not worsted weight yarn. This is like sport weight yarn, but Rebecca has had testers get gauge in so many different yarns that I feel like it's worth a shot, because it might just be a little more lacy, and that's okay. But anyway, these are the 3 skeins I have. Let me know if you think I should like fade them from darkest on bottom to lightest on top, or if I should do all of the ribbing in the darkest and alternate skeins for the middle 2, because I assume, I haven't read the whole pattern, I assume the button band is picked up at the end. So in order for the bottom ribbing to match the button band, I would either have to save part of the dark skein, which would be fine. I could knit, say, half of it, and then save the other half for doing the button band and the collar and the sleeve ribbing, and then go into the next color and then the next color. I don't know, but I don't think that I would want to just use up the dark and then go into the middle and then end up having to pick up my button band with the light, and then the button band and the bottom would not match. So let me know. My mom brought me these 3 skeins of yarn back from visiting my brother in Colorado as a thank you for some things that I had done for her, and just because she likes to buy yarn. The color is actually called Open Smiles, and they put a number on the skeins, and I don't know if that's an inventory number or it identifies what animal it came from. I can't remember what she told me. But this one is 100% wool. I believe it is non-superwash, not treated for anything. It says sport weight, but it is definitely thicker than other sport weight yarns that I have. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'm going to try it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But swatching, doing a decent size swatch and washing it should give me a fairly good idea of how the fabric will behave. But I just think having a nice open lacework cardigan that I can just throw on with spring dresses, because air conditioning and all those things, would be a benefit and something that I would really use. If the blue yarn does not work, or even if it does, maybe I'll just need 2 Corran cardigans, I do have a backup plan. I'm going to apologize ahead of time for the crinkling, but I kind of wanted to show you some of my organizational strategy with my stash, because I have a fairly large stash. I've been collecting yarn for a very long time, at least 20 years, and that is separate from knitting yarn. I've been collecting it. So I have a lot of my yarn in individual Ziploc bags, and I reuse them because it brings me great pain to create trash. So I use Ziploc bags until they absolutely die. But each one inside has a cedar block and generally a lavender sachet as well, because it smells so good. But also an index card telling me exactly what is in the bag. Because some stuff that's bagged up, you can't clearly read all the labels. This one you can, obviously, because there's only 3 skeins in there. They're big skeins, and the labels are nice and big. But sometimes when there's a whole bunch of small skeins crammed in there, you can't tell how much is in there, or if it's partial skeins, you don't know how much is there. So everything is labeled, and like, I know that that's just reflecting the light. So sorry for the crinkling, but so the index card tells me that this is DK weight superwash merino. There are 2 of the pink skeins, a total of 500 yards, and 1 of the bare skein. And so it's a total of 750 yards in there. Okay, so I know that I have 750 yards of DK weight yarn in this bag. And the reason these are paired up is originally I was going to do a test knit, and then the designer took a mental health break, and that test knit has not been recalled. And now I'm not sure if this is something I would use for that test knit, or if I would even wear that particular style currently. So this is a yarn I've been hoarding since I got it. This was the May of 2020 Language of Flowers Club from the Violet Valentine. The colorway is called Peony, and it is like a creamy pink background with these hot pink speckles in it, and it's so hard to show. It's gorgeous though, and I love it. So I have 2 of these and 1 of the cream. So if the blue doesn't work out for a Corran cardigan, I was thinking, because there's 500 yards of the speckle, that I would do a round neck short sleeve version of the Corran. And I would do all of the ribbing in cream, everywhere that there's ribbing. So the collar, the button band, the bottom, the sleeve caps, and the whole body in the speckled pink, because it only calls for like 633 yards for a short sleeve in size 4. And I think that I could go with a little bit longer body even than I was going to do with the blue. The blue was going to be like ultra cropped, almost like not a bolero, but like, you know, just one of those super cropped little tiny sweaters that you throw on. So since there's 500 yards of this and 250 yards of this, even if I needed to do like the sleeves in general in this, I could, but I think it would look best to do all of the lace work in the pink speckle and just all of the ribbing in the bare, and see how that goes. So this is my backup option if the blue doesn't work, but it also just might be a second Corran cardigan option. And I like that my yarn is probably the most organized thing in my entire house. But I like that my yarn system allowed me to kind of look through everything, and because everything is labeled, see exactly how much was in there at a glance, what I had enough of to work with and try. And that's one way that I shop my stash, because I am working on a Stashdown this year, and we will get to a review of that in just a second. You know, I deluded myself into thinking that this might be a shorter episode, but I don't think it will be. That's all right. So, not quite knitting related, but yarn related. One thing I want to work on this evening is this wreath. And if you've been here a while, you might remember that I wrapped this wreath sometime last year in the winter, well before Easter, thinking that I was going to finish it for Easter by knitting some cute little Easter eggs and attaching them to the wreath and whatever. And then I thought I was going to do that this year. And then I realized I'm not going to do that. I want to. I have this desire to knit cutesy little things like Easter eggs, but Easter usually happens during tax season and in a time where it is often still cold in Oklahoma, and I'm like so into my sweater mojo that I just can't make myself stop and make Easter eggs. So my choices are knit Easter eggs in the summertime, which may or may not happen, or do something else with this pastel pink wreath. So I think I want to do both. I want to knit some Easter eggs and put them on little sticks, because this is just a styrofoam wreath underneath. And then I want to decorate this wreath with pom-poms, I think. Lots of tiny pom-poms, or varying sizes of pom-poms. So I am going to get out all of my coordinating colors of yarn, and I'm going to make a whole bunch of pom-poms this evening. Maybe like while watching a movie with my kids or something. Anyway, lots of pom-poms. And then figure out if I just want to do like a cluster, or if I want to try and do enough pom-poms to really distribute over the whole thing. I'm thinking I'm going to start with a cluster because that feels more manageable. And I'm all about having something as opposed to nothing. So I'm listening to an audiobook called How to Keep House While Drowning. And I may have mentioned it before. I don't remember. Maybe I haven't. But, you know, one thing they keep pointing out over and over again is that everything worth doing is worth doing partway. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I don't have to do 100% pom-poms all the way around this whole thing for it to be great. I can just do a big cluster of pom-poms, and I will still have a spring wreath, and I will still love it. So right now, my winter wreath is still hanging up because I don't have a spring wreath that I really like to replace it. I do have a neutral, like whites, creams, and tans that looks like balls of yarn, because I took different size styrofoam balls and wrapped them in scrap yarn. But for this, I'm going to do pom-poms, I think. So I will take pictures and let you know how that goes. So that is a yarn-related, but not knitting-related project that I would like to work on. So the other two things I wanted to talk about are not... well, one of them is the Stashdown. So I guess I should get to that first. So Stashdown update, and I know I don't talk about it every episode, but I am keeping track of the balls of yarn I use every month. And in January, because I was working on that big old cabled sweater test knit that I adore the finished object, but I went through 11 full balls of yarn, and then I used 2 partial balls of yarn, and I started using 4 more balls of yarn. And then in February, I used up 8 full balls of yarn, and I started 3 more. In March, I used up 8 full balls of yarn also, and I used parts of 3 scrap yarns in making that little granny square. So that was good to use some scraps. In April so far, I have only managed to use up 4 full balls of yarn. But that was because some of the balls had already been started in March. And then 1 partial ball of yarn. So that hat base I showed you earlier, that is 1 full ball of yarn. That tiny bit of scrap left, I am not counting. I'm sorry that I'm looking down so much. I'm looking at my notes. So I just am kind of trying to keep track of how much yarn I'm able to get out of stash and not bringing so much in this year. I'm not getting any subscription boxes this year, at least currently. And I have not bought much. I did buy that blue fuzz that I had swatched with on my birthday with a gift card from my in-laws. But I have really been being very mindful about my yarn consumption this year. And that is not to say that buying yarn is bad. I love buying yarn. In fact, tomorrow is LYS Day, and I will probably buy something. I love to support my local yarn store, and I love that we have 2 good local yarn stores available to me that carry very different things, so that generally whatever I'm looking for, I can find something. The only caveat to that is neither yarn store carries a good selection of mohair at all. So I have 2, like I said, good local yarn stores, Knit Stars and Get Stitchin'. And they both carry very different things. And they both have things that I like across a wide variety of brands and bases, but neither store carries a good variety of mohair. So I tend to order most of my mohair, and that's just the way it is. But I love a good mohair, and I wish there was a better selection locally. Anyway, so when I add up everything that I've used, I have gotten out of stash. I have used up 31 full balls of yarn this year, where I have used it up. Like I said, this counts as used up. This is a very small scrap of yarn. You can't do a project with that. Sorry, itchies. So, and then I have 3 balls of yarn that I completed the project I was working on with them, but they are still big enough to do something with. So I have 3 partial balls that I've gotten part of the ball out of stash, but not quite the whole thing. And then there are 7 more balls of yarn that I have started. That means that they are actively involved in works in progress. The ball of yarn has been started, but I don't know if it will get used up or if there will still be enough left to consider it a reasonable, useful amount of yarn. And that feels pretty good because that means that I've either used up or and am actively using 41 balls of yarn. And it is almost the end of April, so that's only 4 months. If you average that out, that's 10 balls of yarn a month. I know that's not using them up. If you average out the used up ones, it's less than that. But it feels pretty good to have only brought in 2 skeins of yarn, the blue fuzzy, and to have gotten out 31 full skeins of yarn, skeins or balls, depending on how they were purchased. So I'm feeling pretty good about my stash down. Does it make my stash look any smaller? No. My stash is still explodifying out of everything, out of all of its storage space, which is going to be my main motivation for keeping control of myself at LYS Day and remembering that I have no room for this yarn. And I want to show love to the yarn I already have. And I have so many ideas and plans for the things I bought. I bought things for a reason because I loved them and I do want to use them. No secret. Between takes and saving and making sure my computer doesn't crash, I am eating a very, very spicy chicken korma. And now I have a runny nose because it is clearing out my sinuses, but it is delicious. I don't know if I've mentioned it on here before, but there is a big, relatively new Pan-Asian supermarket locally, and they have some amazing things, excellent things. And so I've been just getting a few things at a time to try, and my youngest is very adventurous about trying things, so he went with me last night to get some things to try, and he ate a full tray of sushi on the way home. But he bought like coconut popsicles that he wanted to try, and he picked out a coconut milk pineapple drink that he'd never had before, and he wanted to try a can of coconut water. Like he had some things he wanted to try. And then we bought some spice mixes that we wanted to try, and the chicken korma is actually one we had bought previously. And it turned out to be a bit too spicy for the kids, but it is, and it's a little bit spicy for me, but it's within my husband's realm of spiciness. It's absolutely delicious. And it does take me a little while to try and interpret the instructions and the units of measure I have to convert, but it was really good. And during filming, I started to feel bleh, because the hypoglycemia and the not eating, because I was so hyper-focused on the knitting and the filming. So between takes, taking bites of spicy things, that's why my nose is running now. But let's hope that doesn't become a distraction, since I just spent 2 minutes talking about it. So anyway, I talked about the Stashdown and how that's going, and I'm going to continue to track that. The other thing I started tracking this year that I have talked about before is books. And I don't think I talked about books at all at the end of the last podcast. I legitimately don't remember. So if I start to repeat myself, I apologize. If you've been around a while, you might remember that I love a good paper planner. I use an Erin Condren Life Planner with the vertical layout. Let's see if I can find a blank area. So I decorate my weeks on Sunday to keep myself organized and remind myself what's happening for the next week. But at the beginning of each month, there is a full month spread, and then there's like a planning section. So in the planning sections for each month, I'm tracking my yarn usage, the main things that are happening for the month, or my goal priorities, my knitting priorities, and then I'm tracking both finished objects and cast on. I'm using this grid space as half and half. So in the tracking of the books, in the full month spread, I'm tracking the books. And I'm just writing, very easy, when I start and finish things, and then just a list off to the side of what I've read for the month, just so I can know where I am on books. And sometimes, and a lot of these are audiobooks, sometimes the books are like 42 hours long. In that case, like in January, when I was listening to one of the Wheel of Time books, I only got 2 books read in that month, and that's okay. In February, I went through 7 books, and in March, I went through 6. And I don't think in my after spring break episode that I actually talked about the books that I had been listening to. I apologize. My dog is making some noise. He apparently has an itchy. So over spring break, I finished The Lost Hero with my oldest, which is our nighttime read, or was our nighttime reading at the time. That is the first book in the second set of 5 by Rick Riordan of the Percy Jackson universe. So we finished that and then immediately started Son of Neptune, which is the second book in that series. And we are almost to the end of Son of Neptune. So we started that March 18th. And like I said, it's just our bedtime reading. We take turns reading. And I think that that's really good for kids when they're comfortable to take turns reading with you. I think it's great to read to your kids no matter how old they are. So we're really enjoying that one. At the same time, sorry, my nose is running. At the same time, I finished The Choice by Nora Roberts. And Then I also started Encore in Death, which is a J.D. Robb book, which is a pen name for Nora Roberts. And I finished Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. And I don't remember if I mentioned that one as having started in my March episode, but I loved Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. It was an excellent book, and I apologize for not necessarily having all the authors' names written down right here. But it gets to be too much information in my planner, and there's not enough space, and my handwriting's terrible. So I finished Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, and that book was excellent. Would 1,000% recommend. And then I went back to the super light murder mysteries by Ellery Adams, and I started Murder in the Reading Room, and that one was excellent. When I say excellent, I just mean like it kept me entertained and got me through whatever chores it was I was working on, because I listen to audiobooks a lot when I am doing mundane tasks to try and help me get through those things like dishes or laundry or cooking or data entry at work, even driving. There's a variety of reasons that I listen to audiobooks, but a lot of times I just want something entertaining, light, not emotionally heavy to listen to. So then I did the next one, which was Murder in Storybook Cottage. Murder in Storybook Cottage. And then I forget where I saw it recommended. Then I started Lizzie Blake's Best Mistake. And I really enjoyed that book. And I have continued to listen to other books by that author. And her name is Maisie Eddings, I believe. And I just finished another one of her books today, but I just, Lizzie Blake's Best Mistake is about someone with ADHD, and I connected to not everything with that character, but a number of things. And so it was just very interesting read, and it really sucked me in. So I went through that one really quickly in like 4 days. And then I read Murder in the Cookbook Nook, which is back to that Ellery Adams series. And then I read How to Knit a Love Song. And I don't remember how that came up in my search on Libby, the library app that I use. But I found it, and I was like, okay, it's knitting related, knitting romance. And it was actually good. Once again, it was just a romance book. You knew what was going to happen. But it was interesting having all the knitting worked into it, and just, I just enjoyed that one. So then I listened to The Love Hypothesis, which I enjoyed. And I listened to that one pretty quickly also. That was like a 3.5 day. And then I started A Brush with Love, which is another Maisie Eddings. And that was good. And once again, like in April, I've been through 9 books so far. So it's been a heavy listening month, but also kind of like 10-hour short, entertaining, really suck you in stories, lightweight, not emotionally heavy. So then I listened to The Secret Book and Scone Society, and then Payback's a Witch. And that one only took like 2.5 days. Payback's a Witch, maybe just 2 days. That one was an easy listen. And then I did The Plus One, which I just finished today. And I just started, or I'm going to start this afternoon, as soon as I leave to go get my kids from school, A Killer Collection, which I think is another Ellery Adams series. I tend to hyper-focus on authors and listen to everything of theirs. So I need to go back to my recommendations list from January where I asked people for recommendations, but just know that sometimes it takes me a while to get to them because I do hyper-focus a little bit. I did also start How to Keep House While Drowning, which I mentioned earlier, but I'm listening to that one in chunks because it's not a story, it's not a plot. It does suck me in sometimes listening to the strategies and recommendations and things, Not all of them apply to me. Not everything is applicable to everyone, but I've taken a number of things from it, and I do think it is very helpful. So absolutely recommend How to Keep House While Drowning. And then the current car book with my kids, which means the book my daughter is reading to my son and I anytime we're together in the car, is the first Wings of Fire book, just to take the pressure off of her, even though she enjoys reading to us. For the second Wings of Fire book, I believe we're going to get the audiobook from the library and listen to that together in the car. And that way she isn't always having to read to us, but she does seem to enjoy it, and that's been really nice. It's getting my son hooked on some longer books and stories, where sometimes when we're at home, I struggle to get him to stop and get ready for bed and have enough time for an extensive amount of reading. He does like to have a bedtime story, and he does get very upset if there's not a bedtime story, but he likes a lot of the comic book style books, and I find getting a flow in those a little harder for me. But also he likes a lot of how-to books that explain things, and I feel like my husband's much better at reading those with him than I am, because that is just not my forte. So he enjoys being read to. He really likes that. But I think sharing a book together in the car anytime that we're traveling, all three of us, we don't necessarily include my husband in this because we're not all four in the car as often as me and the kids are in the car. So it'd take us a long time to get through a book if we were trying to do it when it was just all four of us. But I think it's been a good way to get him to connect with some longer stories and more involved plots and things he won't necessarily read to himself at this point. He's only 7. So that's been a lot of fun. I think we're close to the end of book 1 of Wings of Fire, so maybe I will get to add another book to my finished in April list and end the month with 10. We'll see. But that puts me at how many books for the year? 25? 24. If I was doing one of those 50 books in a year challenges, I'd be like halfway there. I'm not. I'm just trying to read a larger variety of authors than I sometimes do. And like I said, I have a tendency to hyper-focus and read everything an author has written before moving on to the next one. So spreading it around a little bit more. But when I don't have time to really search for a new book or think about it, I do kind of fall back on authors that I've already read, and I can just pull them up in the Libby app, find an available book, and download it. So that's where I stand for books this month. Since I just recorded last week, I don't know that there's a whole lot of life update. It's still spring. It's still busy. Kids are still doing kid things. It has rained all week, so that has affected our schedule a little bit. But we have a super busy weekend, and hopefully we get through that with no issues. But tonight should be the night for relaxation. And like I said, I want to work on pom-poms for my wreath. And I think that I will get a big sense of accomplishment from like finishing that and it being a thing I can actually hang on the wall. So that's where we are right now. I'd love to hear what you're up to, what you're working on. If you have thoughts about any of the things that I'm working on or have swatched for, please leave a comment below. If you got any value from this video, please consider subscribing, and I really appreciate you being here. I will try and make sure that all the projects and things I have talked about are down in the description box. If I ever leave anything out, just leave me a comment and I will make sure to get that added. But my Instagram and Ravelry and everything will also be down in the description box. I would love to chat. That's the other thing I wanted to ask you about. This is so far at the end of the episode, I don't know if anyone will answer. But is anyone interested in a Discord group, which would make knitting meetups and things like Zooms a little bit easier? And then it would also be a place to just chat between episodes or share with each other what you're working on. You might be already in a bunch of other Discord groups, but are we interested in having a Discord group specifically for this podcast? I would love to know your thoughts. So please either comment, message me, however you're most comfortable sharing that information. Take care, and I will see you again next time.